Hi guys, this is Taylor, your instructor. I'm going to show you very briefly how to save your work properly in ArcMap because some of you have been having trouble with this, and what happens when you save incorrectly a lot of the time is that you lose your work. And unfortunately, there's not much that can be done to fix that. So the first thing that I want to mention is how to organize your files. This is really, really important. You should be working out of what is referred to as a container folder. I just created this folder myself, so you're going to create your own container folder. And I called this one Geog255, but you should give it an appropriate name so that it is indicating to you what is contained in this folder. Your container folder might be named Assignment 1, Assignment 2, Lab 1, Lab 2, or so on. You don't want to have any underscores in the name of your container folder, okay? So make sure that, you do want to have underscores. You don't want to have any spaces in your container folder name. The container folder is going to contain your original data, your extracted data that you're working on in ArcMap. It's going to contain your MXD file, and it's also going to contain any other folders that you're creating, like your Word folder that you're typing up the assignment in, or any PDFs that you export from ArcMap. So currently, my container folder is named Geography 255, and it contains the Lab 2 data that I've exported, the Lab 2 data. Your container folder should be saved in the storage space on the computer that has the most space. And in my case, because I'm not working on the SIS lab computer, this is my D drive. In your case, especially if you're working on the SIS lab computer, your container folder is going to be saved in your C temp. It's very important not to be working off of your USB drive or any other drive because ArcMap might not have enough space to run processes or analysis. And what ends up happening is you'll get an error. And you'll put up your hand and be like, "Excuse me, TA, I'm having an issue here." And they're going to say, "Oh, it's because you're working off of your USB drive." You must save your container folder on your C temp or whatever area in your computer has the most storage. You must be working off of this container folder. So what I mean by working off of the container folder is that your folder connections are going to be connected to that folder. So we're going to work off of our our D drive, but in your case, the C temp drive. And I'm going to connect to my Geog255 Lab 2 data folder. Okay, so here it is. It pops up here. And it provides me with the path name. So the path name is the computer's looking first in the D drive, then they're looking for Geog255 folder, then they're looking for the Lab 2 data folder. Okay, that's the path. Just give it a second. My ArcMap is being very slow today. Okay, so you'll notice that the path matches up with the path in your Windows Explorer. We have our D drive, Geog255 folder, Lab 2 data. If you go into that Lab 2 data folder, you'll see that each data set, so the DAUID data set, is actually made up of several other files. We have a DBF file, a database file, that's actually your attribute table. And your shape file is the actual shapefile that you see in your GUI in ArcMap. Okay. So I'm going to bring my data set into my GUI. This is our dissemination areas of Vancouver. The first thing to note about saving is that any analysis or exporting or changes that you make to your data set, they're saved automatically. So I'm going to export a new data set from this data set using my attribute table. So I'm going to take areas in meters squared greater than 100,000. Okay, it's going to say, okay, you have 878 that are greater than 100,000. And I'm going to export that data to, I'm going to call it 2002 because my keyboard is messed up right now. Okay. So you'll see that I have this new data set. It's missing some dissemination areas because it's only including the dissemination areas that are greater than 100,000 meters squared. What I want you to notice is two things. I now have a new data set that pops up under my data in my data folder called 2002. And if you look in your data folder, you'll also see that, okay, now I have all of the files. So what that means actually is that that data set is saved. If I closed ArcMap right now, open it back up, those data sets would still be there. Once you perform some sort of spatial analysis and you've saved that data set, so when I exported the data, I was saving it. I was specifying where to save it, right? You've saved that data. That data is saved. You could close ArcMap, open it back up, it would still be there, as long as you're saving it in the correct location. So notice that I saved it on the D drive, in my geog255 folder, in my lab2 data folder, in the data folder, right? I'm using the correct path. If you're saving it anywhere else, it's no longer being saved in that container folder, in my geog255 container folder, which means that later, if I zip up the container folder and move it to my USB, that data is not going to be in there. Okay, so it's really important, and I'll show you one more time, that when you're exporting data, you are saving it in the correct location. There is a drive called the ArcGIS default. I don't know if I have it on my, I do, yeah, this default geodatabase. You'll notice that I've saved a couple things in there, and that's because I never needed to use them again. If you're saving to this default.geodatabase, it's local to the computer that you're working on, meaning if you switch to another computer, it's going to have a completely different default geodatabase. The files in here are going to be completely different, which means that if you accidentally save in your default geodatabase, which is always what it prompts you to do, anytime it asks you to save a data set, it's like, do you want to save in this default? Because it's a default. No, you do not want to save in the default. Okay, so this is really, really important. Whenever you're saving data sets, you must be saving in your container folder, in your data folder. Okay, otherwise you risk losing your data. All right, so second part of saving. So the first part of saving is saving the data. The second part is saving the symbology in your map. So if I were to save, I'm going to show you this, and it's going to be a little bit irritating because my computer is running kind of slow. All right, so if I were to save this as pink, and I want to save this as yellow, oh gosh, that is not pretty. I saved it as blue. Okay, that's symbology, right? I'm changing the symbology of the polygons. So if I were to go to File, Save As, and I want to save it in my container folder, geog255 folder. I don't want to save it in the data folder. I want to save it just outside of the data folder. And I call it 2002 1. The reason I'm saving it as numbers right now is because I don't have access to the letters on my keyboard because I'm recording this using the game recorder. So you'll notice in that geog255 container folder, I now have this 2002 1 MXD. That's saving your workflow. It's saving exactly where you are in ArcMap. So I'm going to close ArcMap, and I'm going to open this back up. It's going to be a little bit annoying because my ArcMap's being slow today, so it might take a minute. So what you'll notice is that my symbology has been preserved. It's been saved. My workflow has been saved. If I had an attribute table open and I saved it as an MXD and I open back up ArcMap, that attribute table would still be open. This is particularly important when you are working on a map because the data itself saves automatically, so you don't need to worry about that. If you're still in the analysis part, you don't really need to save an MXD. But as soon as you get into, selecting colors for your polygons, your points, your lines, creating a map, so inserting a title, for example, inserting a legend. Oh my goodness, my computer. Right? I'm not making my legend very nice, by the way. Make sure that you make your legend nice. All of this is now going to be saved. Where I have placed my title, where I have placed my legend, the symbology, for example, this is all going to be saved. And I like to save it as a version. So that was version 1, 2002 1. Now I can call this one 2002 2. And this is my second version of my workflow. So it's indicating to me that I'm a little bit further along in my workflow. I've now actually made a map. And I'm starting to like my map. Once you finalize your map, you can save it as maybe a third version. So I'm like, well, actually, I want the legend over here. So I'm going to save this as 2002 3. Okay. So if I exit that and then open it back up, you can see that everything is where I've left it. Okay. So let me show you what happens when your data gets separated from your container folder. So I'm actually going to cut this and I'm going to paste it onto my desktop. What's happened is I've changed the path of the Lab 2 data from D, geog255, Lab 2 data folder, to desktop Lab 2 data folder. What that means is when I open up my MXD, I now have this, it saved my sort of like symbology. It knows what colors I was using because that's saved in the MXD, right? You can kind of think of the MXD as like your symbology file. But it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know where the data is, right? Luckily, so here's the good news. If you know where your data is, it's just not in your file, in your container file, you can either just simply move it back in and reopen ArcMap and it will be fine. However, if you have lost this data set, which sometimes happens because you switch computers and you don't move your stuff over, there's no way to fix it. That's really the worst case scenario, is if you don't know where this data set is. Okay? If you do know where the data set is, as I said, the easiest thing to do is move this back in and open up your file again, and it should work fine. Another option is to, you can actually connect to that folder. So I can connect on my desktop. I have to basically reset the path name. And it was called Lab2 Data, I believe. Okay. Taylor Desktop Lab2 Data, yeah. And then all I need to do is go to Data, Repair Data Source. And I'm going to say, okay, can you please look in the Lab2 Data folder? And you match 2002, look for 2002. You're repairing the path name, basically. And then it goes, oh, there it is. There's your data. Okay, but that's actually bad practice. The best thing you should do so that this doesn't happen again is put this back. Oh, it's not letting me do it because I'm in ArcMap here. Put this back. Oh, shoot. 1 second. Into your correct container folder here. Because I've actually repaired the data source and I've said, okay, your data is actually on the desktop. If I open up this again, it's going to have another error and it's going to be like, I can't find the data. And you're like, but it's in my container folder. Why can't it find it? It's because you've changed the path name now to the desktop. So if this ever happens, hopefully you know where your data is and you can just bring it back into that container folder and everything should be fine. Okay. There was one last thing that I was going to show you. All right, how to zip it up. So all you need to do is right click on it and add to geog255 rar. And there you go. There's your zipped folder. That contains everything nice and neat, so that next time you're ready to work in ArcMap, you need to move this to your USB or to your SFU vault. So next time you want to work in ArcMap, you just bring that zipped up folder back into your ctemp drive, export it, open up your MXT, and everything is going to be a-okay. Okay, thanks very much for listening, guys, and good luck.